Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another live edition of All Things Sky Blue with me, Mark Smith. Tonight we'll be previewing. Before we talk about Derby, we'll talk a bit about the Middlesbrough home away match that we won 3-0 on Saturday, and then about 20 minutes after that, we'll talk about Derby and preview that game. Our show is sponsored by Right Steel Fabrications for all your fabrication needs across Coventry and the West Midlands, but primarily in the Coventry area. And also we're partnered with the Anecdote Sports Bar at the CBS Arena, and also with the Sky Blue Tavern. So joining me to start with, I've got Ian. Ian, good to have you back. How are you doing?
Good, thank you, Mark. Thanks for inviting me.
Good stuff. I've got Corey from the Rams Review podcast who will be coming on later to talk about Derby. But we'll start the show by talking about an excellent win at Middlesbrough. First away win of the season. Second clean sheet, and obviously first for Dovin in goal. So in sort of last, 4 games, we've picked up 8 points from a possible 12. What's changed? What would you put it down to?
Well, it's a welcome change for sure. It was getting really frustrating. I think it's never one thing when you have such a change in form. But I think Ben Sheaf coming back to somewhere near his best is massive. I think the last 2 games, it's no coincidence that he's been outstanding. I think Robbins is finally close to knowing his best starting 11. He's not chopping and changing so much. The back 3 in particular, I think Bobby moving into the centre is a good move. I think Binks is proving now that he's a better, more reliable left centre-back than Kitching. It's very interesting seeing Rudy down the left. I think that could be a bit of a masterstroke, maybe by accident, but he's interesting. And I think Haji Wright is now much happier knowing that he hasn't got to come back and defend. He doesn't have to help out Bidwell. I remember the Norwich game where he was woeful and very frustrating. He wasn't coming back. Bidwell was 2-on-1 and arguably lost us the game. Now he's up front, he's banging goals in, he's putting assists in, and he's the Haji Wright that we hoped we'd bought. So I think all of those things combined has made the difference, Mark. It's not one thing.
Yeah, I think it's just a combination, as you say. I think it's almost like we've stumbled across this team, particularly the second half of the Luton game. I think that's where it really started, where, as you mentioned, Rudy played on the left. Obviously, Sakamoto, who primarily has been playing sort of wide on the right, is now, him and Thorpe are kind of in a competition now for that sort of number 10 slot. And I think they both look really good in that position. They give different options. And I mean, looking back at the game at Middlesbrough, I think what we were saying sort of before we came on air was the game awareness, particularly that Sakamoto's pass to Haji Wright, which then provided the through ball for Josh Eccles to finish. And I think for me, it gives us another option. We look a better side going forward, and I feel that we're now starting to see hopefully the fruits of labour, where we are starting to convert them chances and look at a threat now up front.
Tat's his natural game is to play it forward quickly. He's got very quick feet. He's a nippy, energetic player. He made a huge difference Saturday, in my opinion.
Yeah. I think, I just think that we look a more confident side. I mean, Haji Wright, to be fair, I mean, I agree what you say about him not tracking back in that. But last season, I guess you can understand why he started in that wide left position at the start of the season, because his record was pretty good. He scored 19 goals last season. He was pretty good, and this season for some reason it hasn't worked out. But do you think it's a case of Robbins has stumbled across this, or do you think it's just something he spoke to the coaches about? I mean, is it just? I mean, I'm just trying to understand why it's taken us like 11, 12 games to get a team that now looks like it's starting to gel now with a bit of quality.
I think he stumbled across Jack Rodoni down the left because of Bidwell's injury. I think he's never really known who his front two are, and he's been reluctant to play Hadji down the middle as a two. That comes with playing a back three. So that change, I think, it's like a chain reaction. Changing the formation freed up. Bidwell's injured. Oh well, it's got to be D'Souza, Jay De Silva then. But then when Rudy played down there, he looked completely at home. So I think to answer your question, I think he stumbled on one or two by accident, but the formation change has given Haji Wright a free run. And hands up, a month ago I was saying sell him in January. He was driving me crazy because we all know he's got talent. But now he's up front. He can take a breather when he wants to. He doesn't have to come running back to help. He does come back to help, actually, but he doesn't have to.
Yeah.
And I think he's happier. I think his head's happier. I think he's banging goals in, and long may that continue.
Yeah. Well, we've got some questions from our esteemed audience. And, please keep them questions coming in, and thank you for that, for your questions. And we'll start with Glenn, who's asking, would this system work if Binks and or Eccles were not available, though? So what's your thoughts on that one?
What, the three at the back, I think he means, does he? I think Torp could fill in for Eccles. Binks, you'd play Kitching, I guess. So we've got the backup, but I don't think it would be as effective. I think Eccles is playing very well now, and Binks is immaculate. So, Glenn, would it work? It would work, but probably not as well.
I guess the other player could add to that would be Bidwell, who's fit, because he can play centre half. I know he's been primarily playing sort of on the left, but he could play as part of a three on the left, couldn't he? Maybe as left-sided players alternative. So we have got options. No, Bidwell. I was thinking if Bidwell was fit, he could play.
Yeah. He's done that before. Yeah.
I think at Swansea he's playing in that position. I think from memory.
Yeah. It's nice to be talking about options for a change, isn't it?
Yeah. I've got a couple more questions on the subject of options. So I've got a couple of questions here. One from Ben Watkin about Rudoni. We kind of touched on that. Do we keep him at left back? In addition to that, your average Cov fan, what role does EMC have in the next few months? So I guess let's start Rudoni and then we'll go to EMC. What's your thoughts on those two?
Rudoni, I don't think has done anything wrong yet. So at left wing back, I mean, he's been a bit anonymous in the 10 role. So yes, I would. If I were Robbins now, I'd keep a settled 5: Milan, Rudy, and the back 3, and Dovin, of course. So just keep it settled. So yes, I would keep him. The second part of the question was.
So the second part of the question was about Ephron Mason-Clark. I mean, what role does he play?
I don't know. I haven't seen enough of him to think that he would warrant a regular slot. We've paid a lot of money for him. He's obviously got talent, but as the side is knitting together, he doesn't seem to be part of that.
Yeah,
and he's going to have to wait his time. I hope he comes good, but I don't think he's anything more than waiting in the wings for an injury or a suspension.
Yeah, fair enough. Who's your standout player for the Middlesbrough game on Saturday?
Middlesbrough, I think Bobby Thomas was outstanding. And I think Josh Eccles possibly played one of his best games for us.
Yeah.
I mean, Sheaf, you overlook Sheaf because you expect it from him. Sheaf was terrific. But I think Thomas and Eccles for me were a step above.
I loved the cross that Eccles put in for that first goal. It was absolutely delicious cross, literally right on Thomas's head, saying, "Come on, son, bang it in, hit it in." That was a great goal. I love the second goal. Had you right to West to get on that far post. Great cross from Sakamoto, and as we touched on earlier with the third goal, with some really good passing, and things really starting to look to gel on that. And I think there's a lot more to be positive about. I think this is the side that we as fans expected to see at the start of the season. And I think that's been frustrating where, the start where we lost 6 games in the first 10, which was, definitely relegation form. Do you think, I've been a bit doubtful of Robins. I think there've been times Doug King might look at biting the bullet, but this justifies King's faith in Robins, and I think he deserves a lot of credit for that, doesn't he, really?
He does, but I've been visible on various media saying that Robins deserves more respect than what some of the fans were throwing at him. He has taken 10 or 11 games to find his best 11, 12 for starting. And that's unfortunate. I still think the coaching has taken a while to settle down. Too many cooks. I also think he misses Adi, but none of us know what happened there. So you don't know whether Robins is still feeling sore that it was an injustice, or whether he just said he had to go, farewell friend. But you can't work with a bloke that closely for 4 years, 5 years, 6 years, and not miss him. So I think Robins deserves a bit of slack, and he's got it, and well done, Doug, for that.
Yeah. Do you think that's as fans, should we accept the fact that it takes 10 to 11 games to find the right formula, or do you think that's just it's
no, because Oxford, look at Oxford, Mark. They've had 16 new players, spent 1.8 million, that's all, because of their budget. And up until a couple of weeks ago, they were top 8, 9. They were beating sides. They were the surprise package, and they were playing well. So they found their feet straight away. So I don't think and we haven't had that many new faces. Is it 4, 5? I can remember seasons when we had 7 or 8. I think losing Fads is huge. I think losing Kells off the pitch is huge. So the spirit suffered a bit. But I don't think it's acceptable it takes 11 games. I think it should take a month.
Yeah.
That's what training's about.
And that's kind of what pre-season's for as well, is kind of finding getting the shape. You look at the summer, you think, right, who do we want? How is he going to fit into our team? I'm just looking at it purely from the outside. But anyway, I think it's overall it's good that we come into the game with positivity and a bit more confidence, and hopefully that will continue. I'm going to bring in our guests. So we've got Corey from the Rams Review podcast who's about to join us. So if you've got any questions for Corey or what, as we talk about Derby, and obviously please feel free to post, and we'll read it out to Corey. So Corey, good to have you on. How things are you?
Mark, pleasure to be back with you. It's been a while, mate. But look forward to this fixture to come back on here and talk to you. But doing well overall.
Good stuff.
Yeah, not too bad.
And obviously a big day tomorrow in your great country, the USA, as well. But we won't talk politics.
Yeah, it's a big day. It's a big day for us. So, I live about 30 miles south of the nation's capital. So basically it's 48 hours of just incessant politics. Not for me, because I'm a football guy. So I will worry about Derby County and Coventry, which is why I'm talking to you, Mark.
Yeah, and that's what we've got you here for. So I'm really pleased to have you.
What's your connection with Derby, Corey? Where does that go back to?
I'm a glutton for punishment, Ian. No, my dad is from Derbyshire, so there's a family connection there. Although my dad supports Blackpool, which is kind of cool, but I have a lot of family that live in the area, so been around the football club, pretty much my entire life, and been pleasant enough to join this podcast about 5 years ago. So enjoying it. Not so much the football, to be honest with you. Sometimes that's just complete dire and garbage, but hey, life as a football supporter.
As we well know.
I like the fact you're saying football, not soccer. So I'm happy about that.
I tell you, Mark, that's how I think about the game. All up here.
Not the NFL, not that football. Right, let's talk about Derby. So 14th in the league, Corey. I would say that's are you happy with that start overall? Do you think Paul Warne's doing a good job for you?
Yeah, Mark, if you'd asked me this question about 10 days ago, I'd have been ecstatic about the start. I think that we, have kind of adapted to this league a lot quicker than what people had thought that we would have. This is not the same Derby County team as what you remember from, a decade ago or 5 years ago, even. This is a completely different Derby County team. But the last couple of weeks, I think it's kind of gotten a little bit more sour amongst the fan base, especially Saturdays. So we traveled to Staffordshire, played Stoke, and it was just an absolute garbage game of football. It was so bad. Derby were terrible. Stoke weren't much better, but we were making Stoke look like prime Real Madrid, and Stoke are garbage. No disrespect to Stoke, fans or anything like that, but it's just dire. And I think that now when you look at it and you can sit there and you can say, Mark, oh yeah, Derby's in 14th and we've got 15 points. That's pretty good. And you could also make the case that, hey, we're 6 points off the playoffs, but we're also 3 points off the bottom three. So, it's starting to get to that point now where the table starts to settle down. I don't really look at league tables until about 10 games in. And then you look at it and you're like, okay, not bad. But then when you start to realize how close 2/3 of the league are to one another, it starts to get a little bit looking over your shoulder. And I think the performances that we saw against Stoke, Millwall wasn't great away. Not ideal for what we would want to do right now. I think we're better than what we thought we would be, but not as good as what we could be at the moment.
Mark's dropped out a second. So what were your aspirations before the season started, Corey? Let's throw that one at you.
Staying above the dotted relegation line, Ian. If you sat there to me and you said, hey, we're going to finish 21st, I would have snapped your hand off. There's nothing I wouldn't give to stay above that dotted line. I think if this football club is to go down, first of all, League One is just a dire division to be in. It's terrible. It's not a great division. You know that. We know that. But I think if where we are right now, we're in a rebuilding phase. And with that rebuilding phase, it's imperative that we stay in the league this year. If we were to go back into League One, smaller budget, smaller squads, I shudder to think what it would look like for Derby County. Not saying that they're going to go to business. We're not in that kind of realm that we were 3 or 4 years ago. But, we have to stay above that dotted line. And as long as we do that, Ian, I'll be perfectly happy.
Good. We've benefited from a change of ownership 2 seasons ago. And we've seen huge changes. Season tickets from 12,000 to 22,000 in 2 years. Although we've sold reluctantly 2 of our better players, the money's been reinvested. Now, I remember Derby County 3 or 4 years ago being in the depths of despair, liquidation, Lampard, Rooney, is the club going to survive? I mean, you've been through the mill a little bit as Rams, haven't you?
We have, Ian, yes, 100%. From people I've talked to at Derby, it was as close as less than 24 hours away from no longer existing. And that's the realities of football today. You can, there's no things, and you can make the argument that it's a good thing, it's a bad thing that owners can spend as much money as they want. That's a conversation for another time. But I think what the disappointing part is that that the previous owner let it get so bad for so long. And he'll take a lot of flack, Mel Morris, and rightly so, because anytime you own an asset and you put it into administration, especially something that is a football club that people care about, you're rightly going to get the flack. But at the same time, you could also, on the flip side, make the case and say, the guy spent over 200 million pounds of his own money to try to get Derby promoted. He got one game away, one weird goalkeeping dropped ball in the box against Aston Villa away from achieving that dream. Kel Roos doesn't drop the ball. Where Aston Villa are right now, that could be Derby County very easily. But those are the sliding glass door moments that happen in football. And we went in the other direction. He didn't want to pay the bills anymore. I think he just woke up. His bank balance was like, this is not working. And it was real close. But we have a man in place now who is a reluctant owner, who was a season ticket holder for his entire life in the North Stand. David Clowes, local businessman, loves this football club passionately. And I've had the pleasure and the honor of meeting him. And he loves Derby home and away. He goes every week. And by every intents and purposes, Ian, he's a very rich man. I think I would love to wake up in the morning and have 150 million in my bank account. Unfortunately, I don't, hence why I do a podcast. But, he does. But you know this as well as anybody, Ian, as Coventry supporters and football fans. 150 million doesn't do you anything. Doesn't do you anything in the game, in the upper echelons of the championship, in the lower reaches of the Premier League, and on the upper reaches of the Premier League, you're not even getting to the table. So,
but Derby are well supported. I mean, what's your season ticket sales at the moment?
Upwards of 20,000, I think.
I thought so, yeah. So on a par with us. There's no reason why. There's no reason why you shouldn't sustain a place in the championship for the season.
Yeah, and what I was going to say, Ian, is he's looking to sell up to 80% of the football club as well to get increased investment in. He's been at that for a while. There's been some names bandied about. So whether that happens in January, happens in the closed season, we'll see. But he wants to, sell 8/10 of the football club so he can help move it forward in a way, because he's just trying to be in that safe pair of hands.
That's a fairly philanthropic approach to have, isn't it? For something
that
he loves so much. Yeah,
it is. Yeah. And David Clowes, to go into a little bit about him, is he has every single Derby County program from like 1950, bar one, because of all the games that he's been to. And I think he missed one game in like 1964 or something, and he doesn't have the program and he's desperate for it. So, it shows his dedication. He goes home and away every week, and he's stuck by his man, Paul Warren, which I'm sure we'll talk about later. He's stuck by him through a couple of sticky patches in League One. Yeah, it is what it is, but we're on a lot safer footing, which is important because we're going to have a football club to support in the future.
Well, I'll keep trying to fill in while Mark's sorting out his tech. Who are the players that we should look out for? Give us a little thumbnail sketch of Derby County's what we're going to face tomorrow in Derby County's 11.
Yeah, sure thing. I think for me, the standout player so far this season, and probably our best player, is between the sticks. It's Jacob Vidal Zetterstrom, the goalkeeper. You'll notice him because, one, he's in goal, so he had a different colored jersey, but he also wears a Petr Cech style skull cap, which is pretty cool. We bought him for £1.3 million from Djurgårdens in Sweden. He's currently in the Sweden setup. From a couple of podcasters and fans and journalists that I spoke to in Sweden, they anticipate that he's going to be the best Swedish goalkeeper possibly ever. And he'll be the Swedish number one by the time the next World Cup rolls around. So he's been fantastic between the sticks for us, having a very solid presence.
We have the current under-21 Swedish goalkeeper as well, Oliver Dovin.
There you go. See, we had Victor Johansson last week against Stoke. We've got you guys on Wednesday. There'll be
a few words in the tunnel.
Plenty of Swedes. But distribution needs a little bit of work, but a 6'6" goalkeeper that can get down really quickly. And he's made some absolute world-class saves so far. And it looks really, really, you can just tell when he plays. Like, we thought we had a good goalkeeper in Joe Wildsmith last year. This guy's just next level. And Joe Wildsmith's, picking splinters out of his backside on the West Bromwich Albion bench. So very, very happy with that. I think you got to look at the two center halves, Aaron Cashin and Curtis Nelson. They were rocks for us last year. They're rocks for us this year. Aaron Cashin came through the academy, played in some championship games before we got relegated. Irish Youth International, fantastic, highly, very, very highly rated by some. I'm probably not as high up on them as other people are, but those are opinions, and it's football. It's a game of opinions. But those three are pretty much the solid rocks at the back. You look in midfield, you got Ibu Adams. He'll cover every blade of grass. That guy will just run. He's got like a telescopic leg, kind of like Aaron Wan-Bissaka, but, in midfield, and he'll win everything. And then you have, Jerry Yates up front with Caden Jackson, who's got pace to burn, and Nathaniel Mendez-Lang, who has been talismanic for us for the last 2 years while we were in League One, and finding it a little bit more of a struggle in the championship as players do. But yeah, that'll be pretty much the ones to watch for in midfield. We also have Kenzo Houtman, brought him from AZ Alkmaar in the Netherlands. He came in for I don't know, £800,000. He looks a real fine Dutch under 20. Used to be a Dutch under 21 international. Shows some good things in fits and starts. Probably physically needs to. He's going to get better physically. I'll put it that way. But they're scored a couple of good goals for us and looks a tidy player on his day.
So given that highly optimistic, understandably optimistic view of yours, why aren't you top six? What's going wrong at the moment? Where does it not quite firing for you?
Well, Ian, if we get more than like 3 injuries, we're completely screwed. We have like no depth. at all, no quality in depth. You've seen that with Callum Elder being out injured at left back. We've had to play Craig Forsyth. Craig Forsyth has had 3 ACL tears in his 11 years at Derby. His pace is gone. He shouldn't be playing as a left. It's like throwing me out there, Ian. It's like if me and you were just playing, it's just not a good idea. No disrespect. I've never seen you play, but I just don't think that we'd be up to the level.
I'm nearly 70. My days are well gone.
You'd probably be better than me. I think what it is, Mark, is we just don't have sometimes enough firepower. Jerry Yates tends to get extremely isolated. I mean, this guy might as well be in the Channel Islands at times. Like, this guy is so far away from play, and he's playing as a lone striker. And if he gets no support, you can't just, he's not Houdini. You can't just wave a magic wand and put the ball in the back of the net. He needs opportunities to put the ball in the box, crosses in the box, get involved in play. And sometimes he's just very, very isolated, which is a struggle. We tend to struggle away from home. Why? Don't know. Maybe it's the comforts of Pride Park. I don't know. Psychologically, it could be a little different with the support at home, vice the smaller support away, although Derby do travel well. Lots of different things could happen with that. Not entirely sure why. But I think sometimes what you'll talk to with especially some Derby fans is just Paul Warne, managerially, how he kind of sets out. It's always, we never want to, you want to win games, obviously. But I think sometimes tactically, the way he sets up and things like that, I think some people are a bit fed up with thinking that he doesn't either play on the front foot enough or his tactics are weird. And you've seen this, Ian, with Mark Robins being under pressure.
What formation does he favor then at the moment?
He's been playing with three center halves and with the wing backs down the side through. So what, a 3, a 5,
3-5-2?
Yeah. A 5-2-3. Because he's got 3 up front with Yates, Mendes, Lang, and Jackson, and the 2 midfield with the wing backs. I prefer it as a 4-3-3. I think that looks a little bit more steady, but he tends to be wedded to that. Although we did play with a 4 at the weekend, and then put a center half who was very slow in the turn at right back, which made 0 sense. And he was lucky to stay on the field, to be honest, Nat Phillips. But it works out. It works out either as a 4-3-3 or a 5-2-3. However you want to navigate the midfield and the attackers, right? However you want to move those dots to fit whatever you want to fit. 5-4-1. It could
pose an interesting tactical dilemma then, because we've been playing a 3-5-2 over the last few weeks, and it's worked much better for us. But we were playing with a back 4 in a 4-2-3-1, which is always Robin's preferred formation. But it didn't suit the players, and we had a really sticky start with some quite poor performances, if I'm honest. But since we've reverted back to a 3, and Ben Sheaf, I think, is back, who is a big influence for us, we're quietly optimistic at the moment that the performances are much, much better, and players are in the right slots. Now, I'm conscious Mark is still away, and I'm conscious we've got some listeners, but I don't have control over the questions. So I apologise to any listeners who are firing questions up, but I don't have access to them, guys. So,
I can see them, Ian. I can see them, and I can take them if you want.
Can you?
I can indeed.
Is that under the comments box?
It is. I can see them right here. So Glenn from Skyrim Hub.
Okay, you've got me. I'm on there. So let's take one as they come. Wolcott City fan James Collins start for Derby on Wednesday?
No, he will not. James Collins is I would say an impact sub, but I won't take impact out and just say he's a sub these days. Signed a 1-year rolling deal. We start with 1 forward, Jerry Yates. The backup 4 to be Caden Jackson. So James Collins is like, in case of emergency, use James Collins.
Okay, so that's your average Cov fan. Sky Blue Sam, why are Derby so decent at home and poor away? You've sort of touched on that, but do you want to answer?
Yeah, but I mean, Sam, if I knew that, Sam, I'd win the Nobel Peace Prize. Don't know. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's a psychological factor. Maybe it's the way Warne sets up sometimes to not go at teams away from home and more of the trying not to lose rather than trying to win, which is kind of a weird thing. But the waveform needs to be corrected. because we will not stay in this division if we cannot pick points above it. Because you're ultimately relying on your home games, and it leaves you zero margin for errors. So we have to get something right, and hopefully it'll start on Wednesday.
Okay, Ben Watkin. Who's been Derby's player of the season so far?
Jacob Vidal Zetterstrom, the goalkeeper. Absolutely immense, 6'6", fantastic guy, makes some amazing saves. Can't say enough good things about Zetterstrom. He did make a silly mistake to give away a penalty at the weekend, but outside of that, he's been more or less faultless, minus his distribution, which sometimes is poor.
And Glenn, hi Glenn, if it's the Glenn I know. Who's the best team Derby have played so far this season?
Ooh, that's a good question. To be honest with you, Ian, I've not really seen any team that Derby have played this year that didn't look beatable. If that makes sense, I don't think I've seen a team that Derby played so far where I'm like, ooh, man, that's next level stuff. It might be Coventry on Wednesday. I don't know. From some of the other EFL games I've seen, though, you look at Burnley, you look at Leeds. They look like contenders, obviously for automatics. And they are the two pace setters, but I've not seen any teams that have come close to them so far. So I'm going to sit on the fence and say, I don't know, Glenn.
I think from our point of view, we had a particularly poor game against Leeds, but Leeds were very good. Now, I don't know whether we made them look good, better than they were, but I think they're the only side that I've seen that I would think will struggle. Burnley seem to be going through a bit of an iffy patch. I'm not convinced with Scott Parker. Neither are the Burnley fans, apparently. Sheffield United will be interesting for us in a couple of weeks. With
Sheffield United, they're pretty good. I forgot.
With some of that, well, they're full of ex-Coventry players, so we'll be interested to see them. Who's this guy? Reece Small. I think I know him. He's my son. What Derby players should we be wary of on Wednesday night?
You need to be wary of Ibu Adams because he'll cover every blade of grass, pops up with the occasional goal. Curtis Nelson's a menace in the box. And I think more than a player, Derby are very good at set pieces. I think going back to last year, we scored the most set piece goals in English football or some crazy statistic like that. So pretty good at set pieces. I'd like to say Jerry Yates, but he's going to be a bit isolated. But if Caden Jackson gets on a run, that man's got pace to burn. So he'll be dangerous.
Okay. Does he play left or right, Caden Jackson?
Caden Jackson plays, if I am in Derby and I am attacking, he plays on the right. But they might switch that because it upsets Mendes-Lang. He normally plays on the right. So we'll see. But he normally plays on the right.
Because we've got the fastest right wing back in the league in Milan Van Eyck. So speed wouldn't worry us down that flank.
Fair enough.
Maybe a bit different down the left.
Fair enough. Mendes-Lang's pretty quick too. So we should be good.
No, you haven't seen Milan. Milan is lightning. He's incredible. Pete Stevenson, what about the match on Wednesday? What are the predictions?
Good question, Pete. Predictions. Coventry will probably wear sky blue and Derby will probably wear the yellow kit, I would think. That'll be my prediction.
Is that as far as you're sticking your neck out, is it?
Yeah, it's about as far as I'm sticking my neck out here. I'm going to go into like my turtle shell mode. I think it's going to be a good game. I think obviously both teams need to put points on the board. Coventry have had, like you were saying earlier, in a poor start to the season, a bit of a sticky patch. And then Derby I think we've drawn three of the last 5 and 2 losses in there. So that's not great. So we've got to right the ship at some point too. So I think it's 2 teams that are going to see each other as easy pickings. And that's no disrespect to Coventry because I'm saying it about Derby as well. I think both teams are going to think, hey, we can get 3 points here. So I think it's going to be I hope it's going to be a good game where hopefully Derby are victorious. But I'm never one to talk about Fight Club, Ian. That's the one rule. You don't talk about the result because then when I say it, it doesn't happen. So I'm just going to sit on the fence here and say, hopefully it'll be a good game. And I would hope that Derby could go out there and get a result. But, it's an away game. So I will expect them to draw 1-1.
So, okay, you take a draw. I would take it.
I would take a draw.
Yeah, we'll get some predictions as well from the audience. We'll see what they have to think. Myself, I would like, if you'd have asked me 2 or 3 weeks ago, I'd have taken any point at home the way we were playing. given the last couple of weeks, I've got a feeling we could sneak it. I don't think Derby are going to roll over, sneak it by the odd goal. Alan Arkins, yes, he asked the same question. Steve McGovern, could Asante and Bassett be an option up front for the high press to chase down any long balls over the top? Not a question necessarily for you, Corey, because you're not familiar with the City setup. But Steve, I don't think Asante showed much on Saturday. I think Bassett is a more dangerous all-round player. I don't think you can drop Wright, so I think he'll play Wright and Sims if he's fit. I don't think he'll play Asante and Bassett together, to be honest, Stephen. Reese, is my son trying to give me some stage management help? Get score predictions at the end, as Mark is having some issues. Okay, I wish I'd have read that 5 minutes ago because the score predictions are coming in. Alan Arkins, Cov 2-0. Steve McGovern, Cov 2-0. I'm not sure we'll keep another clean sheet. We don't do that too often. Talking in broader questions about Derby, Corey, while you're on, what's the sort of forward policy for the next 2 or 3 years? We have an owner that has a 5-year strategy of sort of built on the Brentford and Brighton model, really. Buy cheap, sell high. And he wants us in the playoffs 3 times in the next 5 years. Do you have a similar owner statement, or are you still in flux because of this potential sale?
I think I wouldn't say that we're in flux, Ian. From my conversation with David Klaus when I spoke to him last year, and he said this publicly as well, there's a 5-year plan at Derby. There's a 5-year plan to kind of steady the ship. And that's not 5 years to get to the Premier League. That's 5 years to be able to compete to get to the Premier League. So we would hope within, and we, I think, are in, I'd like to say we're in year 2, but we're more than likely probably in year 1. Get in the championship, consolidate for 3 or 4 seasons. In that time, bring in some different investment, and then make a push, year 5, year 6, trying to go forward. So it's going to be a couple of years. It's going to be a different Derby than what you're used to, with the big names that we've had and the kind of football style that we've been playing. You're looking at we could be down here for another half decade. So, which not a bad thing because we'll have a football club.
Ipswich spoiled it for us all, didn't they? Because
pardon?
Ipswich, they spoiled it for us all.
They did.
Because
they did spoil it for everybody.
Everybody would have said exactly the same as yourself. As soon as they come into the championship, consolidate, tough league to get out of. There are some big clubs, Middlesbrough, Leeds, Norwich, West Brom, Coventry. And then Ipswich go and pull a complete flanker and have two promotions in 2 seasons. I'm not sure that'll happen again with anybody. Portsmouth, Plymouth are struggling. Who do you see as the 3 that will be below Derby this year?
Plymouth, because they have Wayne Rooney as a manager, and the longer they keep him, the longer they will be down there. I know he was a hero of mine as a kid, but he was terrible at Derby, especially after COVID. Terrible manager. His record speaks for itself. I've seen him at DC. Terrible. So as long as they keep him, they'll be down there. QPR looked pretty poor, to be fair. And Portsmouth, despite having won the League One title, don't seem like they've really hit the ground running yet. But again, it's so early days. Even ourselves, Derby, and you guys at Coventry are we're 3 points from that dotted line. So it could change drastically. But I do think that there are 3 worse teams in this division than Derby. And that's trying to be completely non-biased is what I'm saying. I'm not saying that we're a very good team, because we're not. But I do think that there are 3 worse teams. I think QPR is pretty dire. Plymouth looked pretty dire. And as long as they do the whole lose 4, win 1, take the pressure off of Rooney and keep doing that, and then realize, hey, March, this sucks. That'll be fine. And Portsmouth don't seem like they've gotten to grips with it hardly at all. Oxford, I think eventually, Des Buckingham's done a good job, and they seem to have gone off the boil a little bit. Preston's a funny team. Sheffield Wednesday have a weird owner. Cardiff have been poor as well. Stoke weren't great. So, there are a lot of teams there that I'm not saying are significantly worse than Derby, but it's going to be a dogfight, I think, till the end of the season for 7 or 8 or 9 clubs.
You mentioned fairly disparagingly about Rooney when he was at Pride Park. What was that period like? I mean, was it as bad as we all observed?
From the administration or from the playing staff perspective?
As he is a manager. I know you had problems behind the scenes.
Yeah, so I think what he did is, and he was smart in this because his goal was to keep Derby in the division. Rookie manager trying to make his name. And what he did was he thought, okay, how can I galvanize this squad? How can I get results? And he created an us versus them mentality, a kind of siege mentality where it's like, it's just these guys in this dressing room. Let's just go out there. Let's do it. And, anybody would have gotten relegated with the 21 points deduction that we had, but we didn't get relegated until the end of March. It was nearly April. I mean, that's I know it sounds weird, but like we nearly survived a 21 point deduction. It just was, he was always chopping and changing. You never really knew what style of play he was going to do because he was just trying to get a result on a weekly basis. So that was the difficult thing. He came here to DC United. They're 30 miles up the road from me. Ian. So again, he had the team with the 5th highest payroll in MLS and they finished rock bottom. So
really? Wow.
Yeah, they finished, I think they were rock bottom. They were one of the worst, whether it was rock bottom, they were definitely one of the worst 3 teams in MLS, despite having the 5th highest payroll. He went to Birmingham City. They were 6th. They had everything clicking. Everything was looking good in Birmingham. And I was actually in Birmingham at the time. And they got relegated because he came in and they were like, let's take this midfield and let's make sure it doesn't work. Let's break everything that works well here. And they did. And it didn't work out. And his results are speaking for themselves at Plymouth. I think it was a really weird move for Plymouth to go and get him. It's miles away from Cheshire. Yeah. It's miles away from his house. His wife's in Australia doing, I'm a celebrity, get me out of here. It's just weird times that we live in.
I have a really good friend who's an Argyle fan. And he put his head in his hands when they appointed Rooney. He could not believe it.
Yeah.
And they've got a very loyal following, Plymouth, and I feel for them. But I think you're right; they're going to be down there. There's a couple of more questions come in. Jason Gamble. He said, "I'm a bit confused. Can anybody tell me where all the Robins out people have disappeared to?" Yeah. I don't know if you're aware, Corey, from the outside, but there was a small but growing group of vocal, I think one of the supporters called them mutants, who actually started calling for Robins' head after all he's done for the club. Does that surprise you as an outsider?
Yes, Mark Robins is a good manager. Every manager goes through sticky patches. It happens. It's elite level sport. You can't, it's a squad of 23 guys working together week in and week out to try to achieve, this, Ian, when you go to work, not everybody's at their best every day. You got to pick and choose and you get these moments where you're doing great. And Mark Robins is a fantastic manager. If Coventry sacked him, I would personally fly over to England myself, pick him up at Birmingham Airport and drive him to Derby at Moor Farm and make him the Derby manager. I like Mark Robins. I think he's a solid guy. He's not Pep Guardiola. He's not Arsene Wenger. He's not, Brian Clough. I'm not saying that. But he's a very steady, consistent championship manager. And sometimes you can sit there and go, ooh, who else is available? Like again, Plymouth Argyle, Schumacher was doing great things with Plymouth last season. Stoke turns his head because they're like, oh, we can go get this guy. That didn't work out for anybody. Mm-hmm. You get these opportunities where you think, hey, maybe we should stick with this guy. Maybe we should get rid of somebody. And then they do it and they end up worse off. Look at Chelsea. Graham Potter was the guy. Sacked him on a 6-year deal after 6 months. Yeah. You got Pochettino in, gave him a 6-year deal. You're the guy. Sacked him after a year. Now they're bringing in Enzo Maresca. So it's like you have to build stuff, and that's what Robins has done.
Jason's right to raise it because it irritated the hell out of me, and I know my son's on the audience listening as well. And I travel over from France to the games because I'm a season ticket holder with my lad and my granddaughter, and we just couldn't believe it. We leave the guy alone. He's lost his deputy. We've got 4 coaches in who are is odd. You normally have 2 first-team coaches. We've had a turnover in coaching staff. We've lost 2 or 3 of our better, not our better players, but our better characters. McFadzean, our centre half, was a real character. Liam Kelly, club skipper. Matty Godden, who'd been with us a few years and seemed to hold great respect with the other players. So I just think, Jason, you're right. That they should disappear. They should stay out of it. And that's social media, I'm afraid. You get people on the keyboards tapping out messages and insults that they wouldn't dare say to people's faces. And, the quicker they disappear, Jason, and, the less we hear of them, the better, I think. My own view is that Robins will leave Coventry when he chooses to. If he thinks he's taken us as far as he can, if he thinks he's not getting the backing of the chairman, the owner, if he thinks the playing squad are not playing for him, I think he'll have the good grace and dignity to walk. I don't think that's anywhere near happening, but I don't think he'll ever get sacked. Another one here. Have Derby got any funds to strengthen in January, said Stephen McGovern.
Stephen, that's a great question. Right now, it's a question of the amount of squad spaces that we have. So I think it's a matter of Derby have to get some outgoings out the door, whether that's buying players out of contract because no one wants to buy them, or we sell a couple people. I think we're going to cancel a couple loans as well. I think there's a little bit of room for an angle, but I probably have more money in my wallet than Derby do in the transfer kitty right now, which isn't saying much because I've only got $10. So it's $10. So it's what, £12.50. Stephen, they have a little bit. But they don't have a significantly large amount. We're not going to be able to make a £5 million sign, and that completely out of the question.
Do you have any assets like we had Victor Gyökeres, Gus Hamer, or I'm biased, but I think they were the 2 best players for their position in the Championship 2 years ago. And Gyökeres is scoring goals for fun in Portugal, but we made for Coventry decent money on them, 35 million-ish. Do you have a sort of sell-buy policy where you have an asset that you could sell for 6, 7, 8 million and invest in 2 or 3 young prospects? Is that something that's a possibility for you?
Ian, if we could get £6 million for a player, I don't remember the last time we sold a player for an actual, and took a team to the cleaners. I can't remember that because that's not really what Derby do. They normally get, we sold Will Hughes for $4 million because they're like, this kid can't play. I think our asset is Aaron Cashin at the back. 21 years old, played 50-odd championship games, 50-odd professional games, Irish Youth International. I think he's real good. Zetterstrom's obviously going to be an asset. I think lower league Premier League teams will probably be looking at him. Next year, he's played already for Djurgårdens in Sweden earlier this season, so he's kind of with Derby for the year. But to be honest with you, there's not very many people that you're going to sit there and think Derby can get $5 million for him. Our academy was decimated by administration. We had to sell off people for peanuts to keep the club afloat. So the youth academy is being ripped, being real.
That's an interesting angle because we were taking loan players and lower league players 4 years ago. But now suddenly, because of good scouting, as I said, Gyökeres and Hamer, excuse me, and 1 or 2 others, we've been able to build a squad pretty much onto 2 sales. And in the current squad that we've got, if we don't get promotion this year, I think Ben Sheaf and Milan, the lightning right wing back, Milan Van Eyck will probably leave. But I can't see Sheaf going for less than 10 million. I can't see Van Eyck going for less than 8, even though he's predominantly a defender. And if Wharton went to Palace for 18 million, there's an argument that says we could get more than 10 for Sheaf. So we're looking at a sad situation where we may well sell again in the summer if we don't get promotion and reinvest. But it doesn't seem that you're in that position. How do you see the next few years going? Is this sale the only way you'll do it to get investment into the club?
Yeah, probably. I think that David Clowes, while he's a fantastic man and owns and is a fantastic owner and is rich in every sense of the word, he doesn't have the money to compete at the higher end of the championship. Derby are still looking at relying on free transfers, loan players. Who do you think we can finagle here, there, and everywhere? I think we're going to have to. That's the one thing that Derby's lacked in the last 3 or 4 years is a real, like you were saying there, Ian, player trading, trying to bring a guy in, flip him for money. Cash-in's a big asset. I think they turned down $3 million from Brighton last year when we were in League One, but now he's a championship player, so his price has got to be closer to 10. You know what I mean? You think, because there's the championship inflation rate, right? Jacob Zetterstrom we bought for 1.3 because it's Sweden. They have lower costs for players. Probably flip him you could probably get 10 million for him by the end of the season. Not saying that he's a 10 million pound goalkeeper right now, but outside of that, our squad is made up of guys who were brought in on free transfers or very low transfer fees. Who, Ibu Adams was a loan player that we signed for 500,000.
It sounds, to be honest, as if you're where we were 3 years ago, and I sympathise with that, because all you've got to do is turn around uncover a couple of gems. I don't think we were lucky. I think we did really well to get Gyökeres and Hamer. Gyökeres was at Brighton, wasn't getting a game, went on loan to Swansea, didn't do much, came on loan to us, scored a couple of goals in about 15 games, didn't look the full ticket, but Mark Robins or somebody at the club saw something in him and paid $1 million for him. Brighton let him go. And we, as supporters, we all thought, well, we couldn't even pronounce his name, Gyökeres. He doesn't look all that. What's he doing spending £1 million that we haven't got? And of course, the rest is history. He was and is an outstanding striker who may well end up at Liverpool or Man City or United next season. So long as you can uncover 1 or 2 gems like that, you'll build and build and build. And I think we've got a stronger squad now than we've had without having those stars. We paid nearly 8 million for Haji Wright, beginning of last season, who has mixed ratings, but generally speaking, scores. So hopefully for Derby, there's a bit of a bright future there if you can just flip 1 or 2 players. I'm looking at the clock. We've got 5 or 6 minutes left, guys, on the chat. If there are any more questions, Jason comments, it'll be a very sad day if Mark does go. And I completely agree, Jason. I would get the statue built for him as soon as possible. Jason, another question. Do you think Robins would do well as a Prem manager? That's a really tough one, because in the Premier League, you're dealing with a completely different animal. You're dealing with players on 100 grand a week plus, players who I would argue have a bit more of an ego and a bit more of a prima donna, expect more, they feel more entitled. Robins isn't that sort of guy who suffer fools gladly. I'm going to be fairly unkind. I don't think Mark Robins would thrive in a Premiership role. I think what he would do well in a promoted team, I think he would consolidate the squad and keep them up. So with a Southampton or with a Leicester or a side that's just got promoted, I think he would probably stand a good chance of keeping them up, because he's good at that level. I think seeing Robins in a Man United job, for example, I don't see it. I don't know what the rest of you think, if you've got any thoughts before we finish. What about Paul Warne? Is he going to be with you for the short or the long term? Do the Rams rate him?
Yeah, we'll see. It kind of ebbs and flows, Ian. I've met Paul Warne, nice guy. You want to cheer for him, but I think the questions are still out whether he's a good fit for this football club, whether he's still a good, has the tactical nous to get things done. His record in the Championship is not been great. There was a stat being banded about on Twitter that showed his away game splits. So how he does away from home in the championship over the past 5 years, it's absolutely trash. I think he's picked up like 21 points from a possible 200 or some crap like that. Like, it's terrible. And I think it waivers. I think if Derby gets sucked into a relegation battle, he'll go. But again, that takes up resources and funds that we just do not have. So do you stick with the guy and strengthen the squad, or do you try to get a new manager in and work with what he's got? So it's a very, very tight balance, but all the signs are that he's in a safe seat. But Ian, you're older than me. You've seen a lot more football than I have. And you win 3 or 4 games, they're going to build you a statue. You lose 3 or 4 games, and you're in the unemployment.
You're only as good as the next month.
Yeah, exactly. So it doesn't mean anything. You don't read anything into it. But I think that Paul Warren has to get some wins under his belt soon, or else the pressure will be turned up for him, because our December doesn't look great. So I think it'll be he'll have to get some wins under his belt, or else he might be getting a pink slip come Christmas time.
Right. Well, Corey, I'm going to thank you on behalf of Mark and everybody that's listening for your time tonight. It's nice to see that there's somebody as clinically insane as myself supporting their team from miles away. I shall be on the plane again for the Blades game in a couple of weeks, and probably stay over for the week for the Cardiff game the following Saturday. But that's just the fool I am. I've been supporting them since I was 9, so almost 60 years. Corey, have a reasonable day tomorrow, if you can bear the anxiety of your country's election. Good luck with whoever you choose, and thanks from all the Sky Blue fans for your time tonight.
Ian, thank you for the opportunity to come on. It's always a pleasure to speak to you and to Mark. And I always fly over the Ryco when I'm going.
Mark, who's Mark?
I've seen it.
I'm still waiting for him to come on. He's dealt me a white curveball here tonight. I shall expect a point off him at the anecdote next time I see him. Okay, Corey.
Appreciate it. Have a good evening, guys.
And see you again. Bye. Okay, guys. It's the hour's up. Thank you for getting me out of trouble with your comments and questions. I've stumbled a bit trying to keep this podcast together, but I hope it's been mildly entertaining. And Mark, if you're listening, I hope your technical issues get sorted. And play up Sky Blues, and let's go for a win tomorrow, Wednesday at the CBS. Okay, guys, thanks a lot, and I'll leave you now. Bye.